Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at my Phalaenopsis schilleriana. This is a species and it's originated from the Philippines, I believe. And this orchid is actually a rather famous orchid for its flower, but also for its foliage. And we'll go into that a little bit more. But also, this orchid can be fragrant when the right conditions are met. End of December 2018, it was growing a new leaf, but pretty soon, beginning of January 2019, it was developing a spike and at a rather fast speed. So I noticed something about this orchid is that this orchid grows spikes very quickly, usually in winter time, and toward the end of the winter is when it blooms, because its last bloom cycle also took place right around the same time. Schilleriana is a very popular species orchid and is a parent of many complex hybrid and primary hybrid. For example, very famous miniature orchid Jaiho Pink Girl also has schilleriana in its parentage, and you can see that characteristics of darker leaves or leaves with a little bit of purple in them in many hybridized orchid in the market. I personally think it's not that difficult to take care of schilleriana and have it rebloom as long as certain conditions are met. And so for new beginners, I think it's okay to give this a try if you think this is something you're interested in. And speaking of having the right condition for this orchid, this is the photo I took on February 20th. It's after my 10 days business trip. So before I left, there were only buds on this orchid spike. And I came back to almost full bloom except this one bud. And then you see toward the end of the spike, there were 2 bud blasts. So here is the juicy story. So I look back on the weather forecast. There was one day that the weather was in the mid-50s Fahrenheit, and then the next day the temperature rose to about 86 degrees, and then the third day it came back down to the 40s. So during that time, I think that the heat killed the 2 buds. I have my heater set for 72 degrees, so on the first and third day it was okay, but it was during that really hot day that, well, the air conditioning, the cooling would not kick on, it would not turn on because it's set for heat. So I think it's during that day that it was just too hot for the last 2 buds to be able to sustain the heat. And I'm pretty sure when I was gone, the humidity was really low as well. So the heat plus low humidity, I think those 2 young buds just simply couldn't take it. And now here we're looking at the full bloom or the bloom of the last bud. But this video clip is also to give you a sense of what the flowers, everything look like in almost near real time. Every time I look at schilleriana, its lip, I think of mustache or like somehow reminds me of the people on the poker cards. So it's very interesting. I really like its pink flower, its pink color, and the fact that its lip has that really interesting mustache shape to it. And also, if you look at the back of schilleriana flowers, they really truly look like butterflies flying. And now here is the foliage. That's one of the biggest characteristics of schilleriana, right? The mottled leaves. And as far as I know, even on the same plant, different leaves would have different pattern depending on the light and nutrition, or just different condition may cause the pattern to grow differently. And I think this orchid is doing pretty well. As you can see, the newest leaves are pretty long, and even if you look at the media and the roots, some of the roots are actually in the reservoir. So this is really a good indication that this orchid is really liking semi-hydro setup. And right now you can see there is water right around the level of the drainage hole, because I had just literally added water before I took this video clip. And normally I would have an outer cup, a blue outer cup, to block out sunlight, and that's why some of the new roots or the roots in reservoir are looking a little pale or in white almost, because they never really have direct contact with sunlight. So that's why they're in that color. And in terms of care, quarter strength fertilizer, but I do have a plan to play around with that quarter strength fertilizer, maybe up it a little bit, just to see how well this orchid does for this year, if I make that adjustment. And here you see that there is this root, area roots that kind of grew and then stopped, and then at some point it started to grow again. So this is one of the questions I got from my Chinese subscribers, asking if a root stops growing, is it still viable? It's definitely viable. It may even continue to grow when the condition is right, when it has enough energy to do so. But back to this orchid, I think this orchid is truly a rewarding orchid. It's not that difficult to take care of, so if you're even if you're new to this hobby, I think you can totally give this a try. But one thing I would recommend you is that you should probably go online to find an orchid like this, because for species, primary hybrids, it's pretty difficult to come across these kind of primary hybrids or species in grocery stores or regular garden centers. You really have to go to, for example, eBay's to buy, or online websites of online nurseries or reputable nurseries who would do business online to really get species orchid. A lot of my Chinese subscribers are wondering where I get all these primary hybrids or species orchids from, and I said, well, you really have to go online, because typically the kind of Phalaenopsis orchid that you see at, say, grocery stores or regular garden centers, those are complex hybrids. Not that they're not good, it's just that if you're interested in growing species orchid, typically your chances are much better when you go online. And let's go back to the care again. So because it's in semi-hydroponic setup, so what I usually do is that I will wait until there is no more water in the reservoir and there is no condensation along the edge of the cup inside, so that way I give it more water. And depending on whether it's time for fertilizer as well, then I would also add the fertilizer into the water and then just, you know, pour it until the level of the drainage hole. But I do also every other week, at least once a month, I use just reverse osmosis water, just water, no fertilizer, and I will soak it. So that way we can dissolve and wash away some of the salt buildup from the fertilizer, or just anything that might have been inside that you don't want. So we call that a flush. And typically I would fill up just water, clean water, up until about 90% of the cup. I wouldn't do it all the way to the top, because I don't really like the base of the stem to be wet. So I try to do it just for 80-90%, because when I'm pouring water, I try to cover all the surface on top anyway, so they get a little bit of rinsing that way too already. And this portion of the video is that last flower, that last bud that I came home to, and the opening of it, because I couldn't follow along for the other 5 flowers that had already opened while I was on my business trip. So I kind of went a little bit photo crazy with this one, but you know me, if you have followed my channel for a while, you know I like to take progression photos just to show you how they open and how quickly they open, that kind of thing. So here it is. This is me going photo crazy with the last flower. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this year's blooming, and in terms of comparison, this year the way that I positioned this orchid is slightly different. Last year the flower spike was perpendicular to the window, and this year the flower spike is almost parallel to the window, and that's why this year's flower are parallel side by side to each other and facing the window, versus last year because it was perpendicular. So all the flowers are still facing the window, but then they're sort of, you know, lining up, you know, front and back, so they're not really technically side by side like this year's flower presentation. Therefore, if you want to control the way your flower spike is growing and how the flowers may face a certain direction, you want to be consistent with how you place your orchid. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!